First You Think is a not-for-profit ministry of the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. Support us at ucdsm.org today.
Good morning, friends. My name is Elliot Nolte. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs, and I'm so glad to be here with you this morning. So, some of you know that this summer I have been working as a chaplain intern at Methodist Hospital downtown as part of my seminary studies. So, quick pop quiz. What do you think is the number one thing that most people would expect chaplains to do during a visit? Shout it out. Pray! You got it. You guys are so smart. Offering prayer, or the expectation that we'll offer it, is certainly one part of the gig. My first thought when I realized I would be praying with and for strangers, more of a gut reaction really, was, oh crap, I don't know how to pray. Sure, I grew up with prayer. We prayed in church every Sunday, and I had a big 3 memorized. The Lord's Prayer, a prayer I would say at bedtime as a kid, and a short prayer we said before meals. Always the same words, the same meter and cadence. And improvisational or impromptu prayer was simply not really part of my upbringing. I was also taught, either tacitly or explicitly, I don't really remember, that prayer was to be done silently and privately, just you and God. And in fact, when my 5th grade confirmation teacher would pray out loud before class, unscripted, I would just feel downright uncomfortable. Why use all of this flowery language and say God's name like 12 times in one prayer? It just felt excessive and embarrassing, which I know is really harsh. I do remember in middle and high school praying in the shower of all places. It felt like the most private place. And vulnerable place. Yeah, that too. I prayed for, some serious things, that my bullies would pick on someone else that day, or our house would sell so my family could be together again instead of split between 2 towns. And I prayed for some frivolous things, that I would get a particular part in the school musical, or that my crush would smile at me in the hallway. And that pattern of private prayer continued like that for a while, and then it just stopped. So, to be confronted years later with the prospect of having to pray in front of other people who are sick and worried and relying on me for some semblance of comfort seemed extremely daunting. So, I decided to challenge myself and make developing a prayer practice one of my learning goals for the summer. At first, I thought I would take an academic approach and study different types of prayer and their purposes and meanings, but that quickly fell by the wayside. I simply didn't have time in my very intense schedule to do extra research and reading. So I started observing my fellow chaplains when they prayed for patients, what kind of language they used, what types of things they prayed for according to the situation. A prayer before someone went into surgery, a prayer to comfort the family of a dying patient, a prayer for test results to come back with desperately needed answers. The first time I prayed with a patient by myself, I was certain I would at best stumble over my words or at worst offend them. I think of that scene in Sister Act where Whoopi Goldberg's character has been just, thrust into this convent, and she is invited to pray. And she just starts talking and peppers in all these different prayers, and even, I think, the Pledge of Allegiance at one point. And I was so sure that was going to be me. So sure. Remember that for later. We'll get back to that. But after these prayers, the response was almost always, I feel so much less anxious. Thank you. That was a huge relief, and it helped to spur my confidence. And it didn't really take too long, surprisingly, for me to get more comfortable with prayer. I hadn't discovered some magical formula for what an effective prayer would be, and my praying wasn't particularly dynamic. Instead, I learned to listen, ask the right questions, and just take my time. And once I figured out that prayer is a form of communication, it made a lot more sense. I learned that also, in the hospital especially, prayer doesn't always have to be in words. Prayer can be silence as you soak in the weight of someone's diagnosis or prognosis. Prayer can look like getting a cup of ice water for the mother whose child has just died in a tragic accident, or getting an extra pillow for someone who just can't get comfortable. And I find my inspiration for prayer the most often in listening to people's stories. I can't tell you how many times a patient has gotten done telling me a very intimate story with a lot of detail about a worry or a strained relationship or a regret. And they'll pause after, somewhat bewildered, and say, I didn't know I needed to say all that. Or, I've never told that to anyone. Those stories are what make an otherwise sterile space sacred. So I've learned how to pray with others. What about that practice of praying alone that has eluded me for so many years? Well, those words we heard from the inimitable Mary Oliver were a revelation when I read them with new eyes a few weeks ago. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention. And paying attention requires a certain degree of surrender. What are you surrendering to? We're each of us all too familiar with what awaits us outside these walls, the vortex of the doom scroll, the sweet embrace of 10 different streaming services, the vice grip of the 24-hour news cycle. What might happen if we let that static fade? I personally have always been a fan of walking, and lately I've been taking a lot of solitary walks to help silence that static. I walk on trails and through neighborhoods and in parks and even cemeteries. I do some of my best walking in cemeteries. I don't listen to music or podcasts, I just walk. I take in my surroundings, sights, sounds, smells. I try to notice the plants and animals and people that are sharing this earth with me and give thanks for them, the life and spirit within them. I try to surrender. Speaking of surrender, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The hardest and scariest part of reconnecting with prayer hasn't been learning how to pray for others or relearning how to pray on my own. It's been allowing others to pray for me, to pay attention to and hold my stories and lift them up with grace and concern. It's a vulnerable thing, an exercise in trust. I know intimately the potential prayer has to wound or alienate or simply miss the mark. These days, I am challenging myself to consider its potential for healing and connection. And it's something I'll keep on practicing. And I invite you to practice as well in whatever way makes sense to you. Before I wrap this thing up, I want to say thank you. Very, very soon, I will be moving away from Des Moines permanently. I know I stood up here last year and was like, you've got me for 2 more years. And life happened, and you got me for 1 year, kind of. I've been kind of absent, and I'm sad about that. So first, I'll go to the Twin Cities to serve First Universalist Church of Minneapolis as their ministerial intern for 2 years, and then who knows? So thank you for the music and the friendship and the fun. Thank you for the potlucks. Thank you for letting me teach your children and learn from your children. Thank you for trusting me as a leader. Thank you for supporting me as I've taken on seminary and the transformation all of that brings. Thank you for letting me be witness to your joys and sorrows. Most of all, thank you for making this my spiritual home for the last 4 years. I will be keeping all of you close to my heart. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love all of you.